A very good evening, dear students. Welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy Daily News Analysis. So today we have come up with a very important and a very interesting topics from different newspapers, and one by one we'll try to discuss all these important topics in a very detailed manner. And in fact, so all those topics that we are going to discuss are very much related to your prelims as well as mains syllabus. So therefore this discussion will be fruitful, and this discussion will also helpful for your examination. And the first topic, and the first very important topic, is about the hydrogen energy. And in fact, across the world, most of the countries are planning to make a transition towards the clean energy resources away from the fossil fuels. And why? We already knew the reason. So the reason is increased use of fossil fuels or burning fossil fuels would result in emission of greenhouse gases, and emission of greenhouse gases would contribute to global warming, and that further leads to a long-term changes in the climate patterns or weather patterns. Now in this context, the hydrogen energy can actually play a very important role in making countries rapidly a transition or transformation into the green forms of energy or a greener fuel, or their growth is considered as the green growth as well if they switch over to, if they make a transition to the fuels like hydrogen. Now in this context, we will be discussing how India's power demand, rising power demand particularly, can be met through the hydrogen energy. And in India, we already launched policies or programs like National Green Hydrogen Mission with several ambitious targets as well. And in fact, the hydrogen energy has the ability and the potentiality, or it has the potential to replace the fossil fuels. And in fact, India's growth can also be considered as a green growth, and most of India's exports to other countries, particularly European Union, could escape from its carbon border adjustment mechanism, because India's production process would become a less carbon intensive. And in this context, we will be discussing how hydrogen energy can actually meet India's growing energy demand, and what are the shortcomings and what is the potential of hydrogen energy in India's future. So we'll try to understand this in a very detailed manner. And previously, the Union government has already approved National Green Hydrogen Mission. So the objective of National Green Hydrogen Mission to make India a green hydrogen production hub by the year 2030. And in fact, this National Green Hydrogen Mission also has some outcomes. Those outcomes are expected outcomes. And in fact, those outcomes are India's green hydrogen production capacity to reach at least 5 million metric ton per annum. So this is the first expected outcome of the National Green Hydrogen Mission. So India would reach to 5 million metric ton of green hydrogen production per annum. And apart from that, another outcome of the National Green Hydrogen Mission is a cumulative reduction in the fossil fuel imports from other countries. Now remember, for generating energy, we have been excessively dependent on fossil fuels. So we have excessively dependent on fossil fuels, and in India almost 85% of fossil fuels are imported from other countries. So this indicates that we have been excessively dependent on imports. And in fact, if you observe the total energy mix of India, around 55% of total energy is produced from coal. Now here, coal is a fossil fuel. We all knew about this. Coal is a fossil fuel. Now when we burn coal, it emit the greenhouse gases. It actually emit the greenhouse gases, and it is also a source of air pollution as well. So in this context, it is very important that we must reduce our import dependence on fossil fuels, and we should also reduce the proportion of coal as a fossil fuel contributing to India's total energy mix. And that is the reason that the government has launched National Green Hydrogen Mission with the said targets. And apart from that, the government also expected around 8 lakh crore investments in the production of green hydrogen, and the government also expected creation of around 6 lakh jobs. So 6 lakh jobs would be created by the year 2030. So these are some expected outcomes of the National Green Hydrogen Mission. But don't forget that green hydrogen has immense potential to ensure that India make a sustainable transition into the greener form of energy or greener forms of energy. And also remember that we have a target of becoming net zero by the year 2070. So India has the target of becoming net zero by 2070. So you might get a doubt, what is net zero? So net zero is whatever greenhouse gases that we emit, so those greenhouse gases would be absorbed. So this can be done through number of ways. So whether through the renewable energy projects such as wind energy, solar energy, and this can also be done through waste to energy form, and this can also be done through afforestation. This can also be done through carbon sequestration, setting up nuclear power plants. So this is also considered as a greener form of energy source. So through all these measures, we could actually achieve net zero emissions, and in order to become a net zero economy, green hydrogen plays a very important role as a greener fuel, right? So I hope you have understood this. So to achieve this goal, this objective of becoming a net zero economy by the year 2070, so no doubt India should rely more on hydrogen production, hydrogen generation, and apart from that, we should also focus on the electricity storage as well. So this means that we should invest in the electricity storage infrastructure. We should also invest in the green hydrogen generation. So therefore, we need to work on both these aspects so that India's energy demand can be effectively met. Now here, why energy storage or electricity storage is very important. So imagine that there is a less power demand, or excess electricity has been generated through various sources, excess generation or a less power demand in the economy. So in that case, whatever energy or electricity that has been generated, it has to be stored for the long-term purposes. And in fact, when we store energy, so the stored energy can also be used for the production of green hydrogen as well, right? So for this particular purpose, we should focus on green hydrogen as well as the electricity storage networks or the infrastructure. Now in this, we will understand how we need to work on improving the electricity storage infrastructure, and also how we should generate more and more green hydrogen to power our economy. And on this image, you can clearly see that what are the major objectives of the green hydrogen mission that the Union Cabinet has approved. And if you carefully look into the targets of the National Green Hydrogen Mission, so it aimed to produce at least 5 million metric tons of greenhouse gas green hydrogen annual production, right? So 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen annual production by the year 2030. And apart from that, it also planned to add 60 to 100 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity. So with the help of electrolyzers, whatever electricity that we have generated through the renewable forms such as wind energy and solar energy, and that particular energy will be used for the generation of the green hydrogen. And similarly, 125 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity from the green hydrogen generation and associated transmission network. So these are some of the objectives of the National Green Hydrogen Mission. However, in fact, if you look at the other outcomes, as we have already discussed, that it planned to generate, or it is expected to generate 6 lakh new jobs, and it is also expected that there will be 8 lakh crore investments in the green hydrogen production as well as infrastructure development, and it is also expected to reduce 50 million metric tons of annual CO2 emissions, and similarly around 1 lakh crore of import savings on fossil fuels can also be achieved through the National Green Hydrogen Mission. So whenever you write an answer on the National Green Hydrogen Mission, it is expected that you should mention all these important outcomes of the National Green Hydrogen Mission to make your answer more and more attractive. Now, in this context, what is the exact role of hydrogen in achieving the net zero emissions? So we'll try to understand this, because hydrogen actually has a huge role in achieving the net zero emissions, because firstly, hydrogen can actually replace carbon. Replacing carbon in the sense that carbon is a fossil fuel, so we can no longer rely on carbon, because when we burn fossil fuels, it releases the greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So this is the first disadvantage. And the second disadvantage is that we are heavily dependent on imports from other countries, so we don't have the self-reliance when it comes to energy. And in fact, it is very, very important for a country like India to ensure to achieve energy security very soon. So we should achieve self-reliance and we should also achieve energy security. So that is the reason because of which we need to focus on green hydrogen. Firstly, hydrogen can actually replace carbon to reduce the iron ore in the steel industry, enabling a low emission steel production. So the total emission intensity of production of steel can be substantially minimized, and we can freely export this steel to other developed countries also. Compared to countries like China, we have a competitive advantage for our steel. So therefore, it actually benefit certain sectors like steel, cement, fertilizer, those sectors, making them more and more or less carbon intensive, right? So similarly, hydrogen can be used to produce ammonia. So ammonia is a very important fertilizer, and for Indian agriculture, fertilizer is very important. And as of now, in order to produce ammonia, we have been using natural gas, and natural gas is also a fossil fuel. Even if we burn natural gas, it also releases a certain quantity of emissions into the atmosphere. However, hydrogen has the potential to replace natural gas to produce ammonia in the fertilizer industry, right? So this is another advantage, because if we use green hydrogen in the fertilizer industry for the production of ammonia, it will help cutting down the carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So this way also it will help India achieve the net zero emission target. And apart from that, green hydrogen can be effectively used, and it can actually generate high temperatures or high temperature high temperature heat, and it can also produce a huge amount of energy as well. And in fact, there are certain cement and chemical industries where direct electrification is not economically viable or economically feasible. So in that case, hydrogen can be effectively used as an alternative to generate energy as well as high temperature heat. So when industries such which are considered as carbon intensive, such as cement industries and certain chemical industries, so these industries are considered as what? They are carbon intensive. They are considered as carbon intensive industries. So what does it mean when I say carbon intensive industries? So when we burn these industries use the excessive amount of energy, such as fossil fuels. So since they use excessive amount of fossil fuels, they also release a huge amount of carbon emissions into the atmosphere. But alternatively, if they started using hydrogen instead of the fossil fuels, so that would certainly make these industries less energy intensive, and in fact the export potential and export competitiveness of these industries will also substantially increase afterwards. And similarly, so if we generate surplus electricity from solar energy or wind energy farms, so if we can actually generate the surplus energy, so that surplus energy can be used to produce green hydrogen, right? So surplus energy can be used to produce a green hydrogen through a process called electrolysis, right? So then this energy will be stored for the industrial uses, right? The green hydrogen that is produced through the process called electrolysis can be used for the industrial processes as well. And apart from that, electrolyzers. So electrolyzers, if we have, what are these electrolyzers? So electrolyzers actually convert the energy into the green hydrogen, the electricity into the green hydrogen. So therefore, electrolyzers can also help avoid flexing nuclear plants. So what does it mean? So India also has plans to set up nuclear power plants. However, with nuclear power plants, there are a lot of risks associated. Risks in the sense that Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster, Fukushima nuclear disaster. So we have come across these different nuclear disasters. So therefore, a country with a huge population, a heavy population density, so in case any nuclear disaster took place, so that is completely disastrous for a country like India. And that's why when we dependent more on green hydrogen for our industrial purposes, for the domestic or household consumption purposes, then we can reduce our dependence on the nuclear power plants as well. So as of now, a very less amount of energy is generated from the nuclear power plants, but Indian government has the plans to establish more and more nuclear power plants. And in fact, electrolyzers actually consume excess electricity, especially during low demand and high renewable generation, and preventing the wastage. For example, imagine that wind energy farms or solar energy projects have generated excess energy, but there is a lesser demand and we have been generating higher amount of renewable energy. Then in that case, what we can do, we can convert this excess energy into the green hydrogen, and this can be stored for the other purposes as well. And similarly, if we have increased the nuclear power plants, and increasing nuclear power plants throughout India is not considered as a cost-effective method, and it is also very, very complex technically. So therefore, if we have electrolyzers as an alternative, these electrolyzers can also provide a flexible load instead than the nuclear power plants. So this is another important advantage of the green hydrogen or the electrolyzers. And apart from that, producing hydrogen instead of storing electricity, for example, we have generated excess energy from the renewable energy generation plants. So whatever energy that we have generated, excess amount of energy that we have already generated, so that energy can be used for producing the green hydrogen instead of storing the electricity batteries, right? So instead of storing that electricity, if we can generate the green hydrogen, then that would be a sustainable way or sustainable method of generating the green hydrogen. And in fact, electrolyzers reduce our dependence on expensive energy storage systems. For example, if we develop energy storage infrastructure, but the energy storage infrastructure is very expensive, we need to maintain and manage it for continuously, and because of that particular reason it is very expensive and it is not cost effective. So instead of electricity storage, why can't we generate green hydrogen through the electrolyzers, by generating the excess or by utilizing the excess energy that has been already generated by the renewable energy projects. And in fact, the electrolyzers can also help nuclear power plants operate at full capacity as well. And when nuclear power plants are operating at a full capacity, it could actually maximize their economic return by avoiding part load inefficiencies. So instead of having too many nuclear power plants operating with a lesser fuel, lesser efficiency, why don't we have a less number of nuclear power plants with their full capacity? And that is more and more cost effective for a country like India. However, here an example has been provided. Operating 700 megawatt of pressurized heavy water reactor continuously at a full load ensures a lower per capita cost and higher return on the investments as well. So here you can clearly see that there are different power plants established in different states. So please kindly go through these different power plants in different states, because this is very important for your prelims perspective. And similarly, if you are asked a question about the nuclear energy and its potential in India, you should certainly draw a map and you should also show where these nuclear power plants are located. And apart from that, what policy changes are required between hydrogen energy generation and the electricity storage, right? There are a certain policy changes that are required. So firstly, we need to focus on integrated planning for hydrogen and storage infrastructure, right? So there should be an integrated planning. So we should not look at hydrogen energy generation and storage infrastructure. So they should not be viewed as independent, rather they should have an integrated planning. So for that, we need to encourage policies, and those policies which actually promote the co-location of electrolyzers for generating green hydrogen and the battery storage to optimize the power use as well, right? So co-location is very important. So when we have co-location of electrolyzers along with the battery storage, so this power can be effectively used for the generation of the green hydrogen as well. So that's how we can substantially increase the green hydrogen production. Secondly, the government should actually announce incentives for the grid connected electrolyzer projects. So there are certain electrolyzer projects, so those electrolyzer projects which aimed at generating the green hydrogen, but these electrolyzer projects are connected with the grid, so therefore they can effectively utilize the electricity to produce green hydrogen on a larger quantities. So therefore it actually offer financial and regulatory support to industries that install the grid responsive electrolyzers. And similarly, mandating the industrial use of green or low carbon hydrogen as well. So whatever industries we have, for example steel industry, cement industry, certain chemical industries, and industries which produce aluminum products, so these are industries which are considered as energy intensive industries and carbon intensive industries. So they emit a huge amount of carbon into the atmosphere. So therefore there is a need to introduce mandates for the sectors like steel and fertilizer to shift partially to the low carbon hydrogen, and this will be considered as the first step to make a transition from the fossil fuel use into the green hydrogen use or sustainable fuel use by such a large scale industries. And in fact, a policy requiring steel plants to use a 10% of green hydrogen by 2030 encourages investment in electrolyzers as well. And apart from that, there is a need to support hybrid hydrogen storage business models. And we should also develop regulations, and those regulations would allow joint operation and revenue models for battery storage and the hydrogen production as well, right? So these policy changes, these measures are actually required to achieve the target or the commitment of India becoming net zero by the year 2070. And apart from that, India is also reduce its dependence on the fossil fuels, because we have been excessively dependent on fossil fuels, and that's why it is very, very important for us to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And we need to achieve self-sufficiency in energy generation and energy production, and we should also achieve the energy security in the long term. So that should be aligned with India's larger goal of Vikasit Bharat, or the developed country, by the year 2047. So I hope you have understood this. And next important topic that we are going to discuss about, you can also see how green hydrogen is actually produced. So renewable energy is created using solar and wind power, right? So through solar and wind power, renewable energy is generated, right? So this power actually feeds into the system known as the electrolyzer. So we have talked about the electrolyzers and electrolyzer infrastructure, and whatever power that we have just generated through the renewable forms, so that power will be stored into the electrolyzers, and that will separate water into the hydrogen and oxygen, right? So using power, from water we can actually separate oxygen and hydrogen, and this hydrogen gas is then stored either as a compressed gas or a liquid, and then the hydrogen is shipped to its destination where it can be used as a fuel. This is very, very simple process, and that's why it is very, very important that we need to generate energy through renewable forms from renewable sources, right? So whatever energy that we have generated through the renewable sources, that energy needs to be used by the electrolyzers, and electrolyzers use this energy to produce hydrogen from the water, right? So this is how green hydrogen is produced. This is very, very simple, and there are different forms of hydrogen also. For example, brown hydrogen, gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and green hydrogen. So these different forms of hydrogen are also very, very important. So what is a brown hydrogen? So when we talk about the brown hydrogen, so this is also a hydrogen energy production method, but this hydrogen is produced through burning coal. So coal is being used as the feedstock to generate hydrogen energy, right? So in fact, it releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So when it releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, brown hydrogen is not considered as a clean fuel, because while generating brown hydrogen we are emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and brown hydrogen generation mechanism also use coal as a fossil fuel as a feedstock. And secondly, how gray hydrogen is produced. So for the production of gray hydrogen, natural gas is used. In brown hydrogen, coal is used, but in gray hydrogen, natural gas is actually used to transform, it is being transformed by burning methane and the resulting carbon dioxide is released back into the air. So in this process also carbon dioxide is released into the air, and this also contributes to the greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, and this is also not considered as a clean fuel. Now what is a blue hydrogen? So hydrogen that is produced from the natural gas, but the output carbon dioxide is captured and stored, right? So in this process also carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, but this carbon dioxide is captured and stored, and thereby avoiding the carbon emissions. And secondly, and apart from that, the green hydrogen also. So we have discussed about the green hydrogen. So through renewable forms of energy, right, wind, solar energy, wind energy, whatever energy that we have produced, so that energy will be used through electrolyzers to produce the green hydrogen, right? So in this form of green hydrogen, the greenhouse gases will not be emitted into the atmosphere. So hydrogen which is extracted from the water using method called electrolysis method, and that is powered by renewable energy, right? So in this method no carbon is released into the atmosphere, and because of that reason it is considered as a clean hydrogen or green hydrogen. So next important topic is India's public health crisis, right? So we'll discuss about India's public health crisis. So what is the context? So the context is that, you know, for over 2 months now, a section of Kerala's 26,125, a strong community of ASHA workers. Now, when we talk about the ASHA workers actually play a very, very important role at the grassroots level healthcare system or primary healthcare system. So in the state of Kerala, around 26,125 ASHA workers, they are also called as accredited social health activists, have been on day-night agitation on the streets, and they are also demanding better remuneration and even retirement benefits for them, since they are substantially contributing for strengthening grassroots level healthcare system. So this is why it is in news. And apart from that, the agitation by the ASHA workers in the state of Kerala has gained a much attention and was also raised the issue in the parliament as well. And in fact, the issues raised by the ASHA workers remain unsolved. So what are the important issues that these ASHA workers who are agitating have raised, and what are their key demands, and what is the contribution of the ASHA workers in strengthening the public healthcare system at the grassroots level? We'll try to understand this as well, right? So first of all, we'll understand who are ASHA workers. So ASHA workers are also known as accredited social health activists. So they are accredited social health activists, and almost all ASHA workers are female health workers, and they work at the grassroots level or at the village level. And in fact, these ASHA workers are instrumental in the successful implementation of the National Health Mission, and this National Health Mission started in the year 2005. And National Health Mission is very, very important when it comes to the strengthening the existing healthcare infrastructure or healthcare architecture in India. And what are the key responsibilities of the ASHA workers? So firstly, we'll try to understand what are the key roles and responsibilities of the ASHA workers. And ASHA workers play a very, very important role in mobilizing women for institutional deliveries and antenatal care. Now in India, the total institutional deliveries reached to around 90%, above 90%, right? Most of the deliveries in India are institutional deliveries, and because of that reason, the infant mortality rate has significantly came down, and maternal mortality rate has also came down significantly, right? So this is because of the exceptional work performed by the ASHA workers. Secondly, immunization is also very, very important. So immunization and vaccination of the young children. so that the young children can be protected from dangerous diseases, and it will also play a very important role in reducing the infant mortality rate as well. So these ASHA workers go every home, right? In a village, they go every home, they increase awareness about the immunization, they take up the immunization drives, they take up the vaccination drives as well, and they also play a very important role in increasing awareness among people about the importance of the family planning as well. And ASHA workers played a very important role in the southern part of India that has led to the almost the population stability in southern part of India. And similarly, hygiene and nutrition is very important, especially in the rural areas, and ASHA workers have been doing exceptional works in terms of promoting awareness, educating, and also knowledge dissemination in the areas of hygiene and nutrition among the pregnant women, lactating women, and also the young adolescent girls as well. And similarly, ASHA workers are also managing the basic health data, supporting outreach during the public health emergencies, and they have done a significant work during the COVID-19 pandemic. When the COVID-19 pandemic has started impacting population on a large scale, the hospital beds were inadequate, hospital infrastructure was inadequate, and hospitalization was not possible for all the patients. And in that case, most of the COVID-19 infected individuals are stayed at homes, and these ASHA workers have provided all necessary essentials, and they also looked after the health of the COVID infected people at homes. So therefore, they have done exceptional works during the COVID-19 pandemic, and in case any such public health emergencies, these ASHA workers can be considered as the backbone of India's public healthcare ecosystem as well. So therefore, they form the backbone of rural health ecosystem and primary health, and especially in states where there is a low doctor and patient ratios and a limited infrastructure. So there is no doubt that in India, we have a very less doctor patient ratios, and we also have poor public health infrastructure. Now in this case, it is not surprising when we say ASHA workers are the backbone, they are the instrument in the rural health system. But they are not legally considered as the employees of the state government, but they are legally considered as the volunteers. They are just considered as the health volunteers, which means they do not get a fixed salary, they don't have job security, they don't have a social protection. And because of that reason, the ASHA workers in the state of Kerala have been protesting for a revised pay and also the post-retirement benefits. So since they are just considered as a volunteers but not employees, they also get a very less salaries, right? So in fact, there are certain key issues, and those key issues have to be focused here. Now, what are the key issues that have to be focused here? So firstly, when the governments are not considering the demands of the ASHA workers, when the government started looking at the ASHA workers as just volunteers, it will lead to the informalization of the public sector work in India, particularly public health sector work in India, because ASHAs are technically the government service providers, but they are legally recognized as the volunteers, and they are outside the formal workforce, and that is why they won't get the post retirement benefits, they won't get increased pay as well during their service. So this is the first problem, and therefore this particular loophole which is existing, so it actually blurs the line between volunteerism and the labor exploitation. So it could amounts to labor exploitation, and the government has been providing healthcare services to the people in the rural areas through the ASHA workers, or ASHA workers are playing a very, very important role. However, it also amounts to the labor exploitation also, but the government has not providing enough adequate remuneration for these ASHA workers, and it leads to the a large scale informalization of public health in India. And apart from that, gender and labor rights, right? So we should also talk about the gender and labor rights as well, because most of these ASHA workers are women, right? So almost all women workers are women, and their undercompensated work actually reflects undervaluation of women's labor, especially in care work, because they are not provided with a decent amount of salaries, and they are also not given the post-retirement benefits. They don't have the social security, they don't have the job security as well. And in fact, it actually reinforces a systematic gender inequality encouraged by the state itself in the labor market. And apart from that, so if we talk about health as a whole, so health is a state subject under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, right? So since health is the state subject in the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, so who should be given the salaries to the ASHA workers is in question. But here the ASHA workers are implementing national schemes such as National Health Mission. So National Health Mission implementation depends on the central funding. However, when center delays funding for such a flagship healthcare schemes, or even caps its share on such schemes, states are forced to make a tough choices in the sense that not giving job security, not giving social security, not giving post-retirement benefits, not giving higher salaries to these ASHA workers. So this case actually shows how vertical fiscal imbalances actually impact the service delivery and the labor welfare as well. And similarly, public health capacity and soft infrastructure, because ASHAs are considered essentially for India's health outcomes. So they are very, very important for India's larger healthcare outcomes from maternal care, vaccination, immunization, hygiene, sanitation. For all these different roles, ASHA workers play a very, very important role, but yet their working conditions shows that there is a mismatch between the policy intent of the governments and the state's capacity to provide a remuneration for the ASHA workers. However, without investing in the soft infrastructure, public health goals cannot be achieved in this case. However, what should be done in the long term? So certain measures have to be taken, have to be adopted in the long term. So firstly, there should be a regularization with the safeguards. There should be certain safeguards with regularization. The government can actually absorb these ASHA workers into the formal healthcare system as a contract or an auxiliary staff with job protection such as social security, job security, post-retirement benefits, increasing their salaries, providing them pensions, insurance. So this can actually be done so that it can actually motivate the ASHA workers to work better and improve the existing healthcare ecosystem at the grassroots level. Secondly, there is a need to reform National Health Mission employment model. So National Health Mission employment model should also be reformed. So the National Health Mission should be restructured to ensure guaranteed payments, annual revision of incentives, and even the clear grievance redressal mechanisms as well. So there should be a clear grievance redressal mechanisms for the ASHA workers, and even there is a need to ensure center state financial coordination on this matter, because the national health policy is primarily the flagship healthcare scheme of the central government. However, the state health is a state subject in the 7th schedule of the Constitution. So therefore there is a need for a larger center state coordination on this matter, such as timely release of national health mission funds. There should be no delays, and a more flexible funding model is essential and important as well. Similarly, states should be allowed to innovate while center guarantees minimum standards that have to be adopted, that should be followed. And apart from that, there should be an institutional dialogue. So instead of just ignoring or discrediting unions like Kerala Asha Workers Association, government should actually engage with them, right? So that is very, very important, and government should also plan to develop sustainable models for the workers' inclusion, better working conditions, and overall welfare of the Asha workers, since they are considered as backbone, since they are considered as instrumental in strengthening the public healthcare ecosystem in India. So the next very important topic is how China and Russia together wanted to reduce America's influence in the Eurasian region. So Eurasian region including both Europe and as well as Asia, right? So because that could potentially benefit China, and declining of US will benefit Russia. Because of that particular reason, both Russia and China have been coming along with each other to reduce US influence in the Eurasian region, right? So particularly in the context of Trump became the president of US, and after Trump became the president of US, he started a tariff war, and he even started criticizing countries in Europe for taking benefits of US military power, US finances, right? So in this context, there seems to be a strained relation between several countries in Indo-Pacific and also in Europe, and China has been looking at this as an opportunity to further strengthen its relations with all those countries and gradually limit US influence in these countries, and that will potentially benefit China in the long term, right? So tensions escalate under Donald Trump's presidency, and in this backdrop, both China and Russia are intensifying their efforts to weaken US-led alliances in the Eurasian region. And both China and Russia have been utilizing their existing economic, diplomatic, and regional strategies to achieve this goal. And in fact, this actually marks a very, very important moment in global geopolitics, where the principle of Mitra Bhedam, or strategic separation of allies. For example, there are two allies, and strategically separating those two allies to benefit a third country is considered as Mitra Bhedam, is visibly unfolding or visibly emerging as well in the global geopolitics. Now, in this context, we'll talk about the strategic realignment of Eurasia away from US close to China. So Russia and China are capitalizing on US discontent. There is an existing discontent on US in Europe as well as some countries in the Indo-Pacific region. So therefore, Russia and China are looking to capitalize this discontent, aiming to split Washington from key partners in Europe and Asia. So there are some countries which are considered as key partners of US in Asia and also Europe. So China has been looking to separate US and the key partners of US so that it can strengthen itself in those respective regions or with countries. Secondly, US has been very often criticizing the European countries for the free riding military partners, right? So he very often criticized European countries as free riding military partners, and in fact, Donald Trump, after he became president, he started adopting the economic protectionist measures, such as announcing tariffs even on friendly countries, have strained the long-standing alliances, and it has also created openings for the adversaries to US, and that's where China has found this as an opportunity, and in fact disenchanted with the US actions, on Ukraine, and even troop deployments. There are some European countries. So these European countries are started acting more closely with the China to protect multilateralism and also the economic interests of those respective countries. And multilateralism will also benefit China as of now. As of now, multilateralism will also benefit China. China strongly opposes protectionist stance that has been adopted by the Donald Trump, and even some European countries also strongly opposing the protectionist stance of US President Donald Trump. And that's where the interests of these European countries, some Asian countries, and also China's interests are actually aligned, and that's where it actually creates rifts or differences. And in recent times, we also very often see there is a proactive Chinese neighborhood diplomacy, and there are attempts of China and its Asian outreach. The examples are Xi Jinping, president of China, so recently paid official visits to Vietnam, Cambodia and Malaysia, along with a revived trilateral talks with countries like Japan and South Korea. And in fact, Japan and South Korea are considered as a close allies of US. So therefore, it actually reflects efforts to secure regional loyalty amid US and China tensions. So as US actually strengthens the Indo-Pacific ties, China's neighborhood diplomacy seeks to shelve differences with countries like South Korea, Japan and other important countries in Asia and European region. And China also plans to build a strategic partnership with regional states including India as well. However, one thing that we should understand here, despite there is a growing trade, Southeast Asian countries have been facing a massive deficit with China, including India also. Right, so India is also having a massive trade deficit with China, and this is the case for countries like South Korea, Japan and these Southeast Asian countries. So because of this particular reason, they continue to align themselves with the US, because if you look at India has the surplus balance of trade with US, 45 billion US dollars of surplus balance of trade. But with respect to China, India has around 100 billion trade deficit, and because of that reason, India would look to strengthen its relations with US and would look for a favorable trade deal with US to further improve its surplus trade balance, right? So rather than aligning itself with the China. So therefore, the protectionist attitude of US President Donald Trump certainly resulting in constraints in its relations with Europe and some countries in Asia and Southeast Asia. However, China has been looking this as an opportunity to separate the countries, both US and other countries, so that it can substantially increase its influence with all these countries. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like a lecture, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.